When you save on auto insurance for driving safe with USAA Safe Pilot, you'll feel like a big deal, even in a traffic jam. Save up to 30% with USAA Safe Pilot. Restrictions apply.
Same old Here's Johnny. You're gonna need a bigger boat. So serious.
I am Iron Man.
This is a tasty burger.
Welcome to the InSession Film Podcast.
Welcome to the new podcast presented by the female film critics of InSession Film. We are speaking, we love movies, we are women in session. I'm Kristin Battestella at Therefore Review. Amy Thomasson, our drama teacher by day. School is out, it's summertime finally, it is Pride. You are at A. Thomasson 11, our InSession film critic by night. We are talking about The Adventures of Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, a film very dear to me. Dave Giannini, our InSession editor. He puts up with so much from us.
He does indeed.
Thank you, Dave, for being here.
Yeah, of course. I'm happy to be here. I just have a question. Am I the first non-woman guest on your show?
Yes.
Indeed you are.
Yes. Breaking
Yes.
new ground. Yes, I love it.
But we go by labels, though. You know, that's the great thing about being at InSession. I mean, we love being able to have this opportunity. So we want to spread, some of the love and the diversity. And we have so many international film critics. Shout out to Zia down, not quite down under, a little bit over from New Zealand. I did have a chuckle when I did see that this is listed as in the foreign films on Amazon Prime, and I'm like, it's in English. Just because it's Australian, it's not a foreign film. This film
I don't know. That's Australia's that's a totally different world. There's spiders as big as people. I think this counts as foreign film.
The first time I saw it, I think I didn't know what to think because I probably didn't get some of the little cultural references, but the film has just grown on me so much. I love it so much. And I will say, when I first came to InSession, our other illustrious leader, Ryan, I drive him up the wall still.
Who?
I know you.
Don't know him. Can't help you.
Drive him up the wall. I know, because I was asking him about all kinds of other copy and the tech setups and how to submit everything, and he's like, it's okay. And I thought, oh no, maybe this isn't going to work out. I'm getting upset and nervous. And then in our group chats or something, I don't even remember what it was. Dave, you mentioned something about Guy Pearce, and I was like, I found my people.
Yes.
Found my people. So you love this film. This film is dear to me. I feel like we may get some JD tears coming on here, getting emotional. But now, Amy, you just recently rewatched The Adventures of Priscilla, Queen of the Desert.
This is true. I saw it when I can't say I saw it when it came out because I definitely didn't see it in a movie theater, but I watched it because for folks at home, it came out in 1994. So it came out the same year as Forrest Gump, Pulp Fiction, but also, speaking of movies that take place far and away, Heavenly Creatures came out that year as well. And so they were doing that over in New Zealand. But I really liked it when it came out. And then for whatever reason, it just never came across my radar again. So when you said that we were going to do a podcast, I was like, I can't wait to see it again. And I will say that two things I remembered about the film was Guy Pearce on the bus with the silver trailing behind him, which is such an iconic image in my mind. It's like burned into my memory. That image is just so glorious. And the bit with the ping pong balls, but I'll leave it at that.
That is a hard moment to forget. That's
let's jump out the gate then, and let's get some of the flaws out of the way, because you said this is 1994, so there is some dated things in this film. It is very anti-women. The scene you're talking about, it's a woman gets up on stage and does a few entertaining things,
and an ethnic woman at that.
Yes.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of racism, mail order bride kind of things about that. So, there's dead naming, there's some bi erasure. So there's a lot of things that are today would be not cool. But
I was going to ask you about that. What do you think about the casting? If they had that cast today, would it get condemned for casting non-trans people.
Physical media rant, because it drives my husband crazy, because I've got this movie on like every copy possible. But a lot of the features in the behind the scenes, how the director Stephan Elliott was talking about writing the script from his past experiences. So a lot of the terminology that he was hearing, that he uses, was, and unfortunately how people still talk ignorant. And how when he initially was looking to cast real drag queens, nobody wanted to do it. And and for me, as much as I know we'll get into this, I'm sure, as much as I love Guy Pearce, for me, this movie was Terrence Stamp. I was blown away by his performance in this film. And he says this was the most difficult thing he ever made, where he had to go as an actor to discover, the character himself, but that it was so worthwhile. Now, Dave, is the flaws and the casting, looking at it today, is that a mar on the film?
No, I think it's so important to deal with context when we're talking about a film, that even at films that are like 5 years old or more, you have to take in what was going on at the time, right? And this is it's kind of crazy how out there this movie is. And it helps that I don't think you don't have any major stars here, right? You have people kind of on the come up. And to your point, I actually read an interview with Hugo Weaving, because people have come to him and been like, hey, there's no gay people in this movie either. Like, not just not trans people, but none of the gay characters are played by gay actors. And he said the same thing, that the director and writer was like, I tried to cast gay people in this movie and nobody wanted it. So I played the hand I was dealt. Now, if this was made today, would this have a trans actor and 2 gay actors? Yeah, I think so. But we can't judge it based on that, because it's 1994. I'm old enough to be in high school when that came out, which hurts me a little bit, but that's a lot of time has passed, right? It would be like, you mentioned, we were talking earlier about Brief Encounter. If we started looking at gender roles based on 2023 in Brief Encounter, that's silly. Like, why would we do that? And I think that's sometimes that's where the social media generation has kind of gone wrong, is we're not taking a look at what's actually happening during this time and how progressive it was for the time to have a trans main character and to have a pretty stereotypically masculine actor portray that role is kind of gutsy. I mean, Kneel Before Zod to this is a huge jump, right? And he's stunning in this role, and it's respectful and kind in its presentation. Yes, there are other people on the outside that are making terrible comments, but if you go in the backwoods of any country, that's what you're going to get. I mean, I'm from Kentucky and I don't go outside of the city limits of where I live as a queer person for that reason. I'm not going out in the hollers out in the country and waving a pride flag, because it's scary out there and gun ownership is way up in this state. So you stay in the little blue dot, you stay where you're safe. And in some ways, I'm watching this and I was getting kind of emotional about that aspect of it, because to me, that's essentially the message of the movie. Is like, yeah, we talk trash about where we're from and we like to complain, but there's a reason we're here. It's home. Like, we've made it our home and our people are here. Our tribe is here. So it's like a perfect movie for Pride Month in that way. It's like, yeah, we can go on these adventures and have a good time, but we come back home to where it's safe and to where we're accepted. And, that's why if you look at the population of queer people, it's like, okay, in the big cities, let's go where it's safe, where the rest of us are. So I really like that message of the movie. And the thing I was remembering as I watched this was that I saw the American version of this first. Do you know what movie I'm talking about? Yeah. So To Wong Fu, Thanks for Everything, Julie Newmar, that's the American star-studded version of this. So I saw that first and I enjoyed it and it was fun. And then a friend of mine was like, oh, no. This is what you need to watch. And it's one of those that as soon as I watched it, Tu Wong Fu kind of went on the back burner and looked a lot worse after watching this, because this one just has so much more heart and it doesn't depend on that star power. And the 3 lead performances here are stunning. But you're right, there are anti-woman moments certainly. And there's a whole sequence about like, are you gay or are you straight or what are you, somewhere in the middle? Like just, and it's kind of gross, especially as a bisexual man. Like watching that, I'm kind of like, oh, that's not the best. But I also remember what it was like to be bi in 1994 when I was in high school, and that attitude was very prevalent. And I think it's important for us to remember those attitudes need to be shown on film as well. Because if we just erase it, then we're not actually dealing with the bi erasure, right? If we're just like, no, everybody loves bi people and everyone's fine with it, then it's like, okay, now it's no longer genuine. And I think especially with a queer movie, that genuineness has to come through, or you're not going to catch your kind of lightning in a bottle like you do with this movie.
It really is. It is such a special film. And I know that might sound corny, but it is. And one of the things I wish, and again, Dave, you and I we're in high school at the same time, that, and I'm going to sound 800 years old when I say this, but the younger generation needs these films because they really need to understand how far people have come. And I remember I lived in a pretty progressive area. I had friends who were out and gay in high school, and they were not, I don't want to say that they weren't bullied. It wasn't my experience. So I don't want to say for them, oh, it was so easy for them. Sure. It wasn't, but they were out, and I know they were never victims of violence, but they also had a little queer community.
Right.
Which if we went back another 20 years, they wouldn't have had. Also, when people think about, especially casting straight people as queer characters, you remember this came out in 1994, Philadelphia came out in 93. And nowadays, there'd probably be a big brouhaha about having Tom Hanks, a straight man, playing that character. However, it was a smart choice to get Tom Hanks because Tom Hanks is going to get people into theaters. And that is what people need to see, these films. And if you can get Tom Hanks for straight people, that's going to get them into the theaters, because and Tom Hanks said this in The Celluloid Closet, he's a safe guy. Right. He's funny. People know him. So him playing that role, it's a lot, could possibly open up people's minds more. And I think that's a really good point to remember. And like you said, as progressive as we are, in the past it was only in the past 10 years that it became illegal to fire somebody for being gay.
Right.
That's not that long ago. It's been since I've been living in South Carolina, and relatively speaking, I haven't been here very long. And now, but people need to remember, and a lot of the younger generation doesn't, that there was a time where if people knew you were gay, that's it. Life over.
Right.
And the real fear that people had, Patton Oswalt did a whole thing about this because he was talking about a friend of his that was gay and got beaten up every single day and didn't know any gay people and all of that. And that guy now has a son, a nephew, and the nephew was like, wow, the Gay Stray Alliance at our school is being forced to have a separate prom. And I just feel really oppressed by that. And Patton Oswalt's like, you're getting your own prom and you have a Gay Straight Alliance. Like, are you kidding me? Like, do you know how lucky you are?
Yeah.
And it's true. And I am not saying it's easy now. Like, I'm not making a case for that, but things have completely changed, and people really do need to remember that it's a miracle that this movie got made at all.
Totally. Yeah.
Let alone having, making the things that it did. And I like that they kind of talk about, but to even discuss what does it mean to be bisexual, that they're shocked because people don't understand those differences, that they're shocked that he has a wife. And not only does he have a wife, he has a really awesome relationship with her. And I loved that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you bring up a lot of good points. And, I grew up in a really progressive area. I grew up in the Bay Area in California, but I also went to a Jesuit high school, and that high school had no gay straight alliance. We had to start it in secret, and almost got kicked out of high school for doing so. So, and this again, yeah, I'm old, but not that old. Like I'm 90, right? This is not that far in the past. And this is in a super progressive area. And kids were bullied, and kids were picked on, and kids were beat up as when I was in high school, right? So no, are the problems gone? Absolutely not. We have a lot more movement to do. But if you take a look at the path that we've gone on, especially if you go back a little bit further, like from the 80s till now, there's a massive difference. And it's always so important for us as queer people to see that process and to understand how far we've come, not only so we'll be grateful, but so we don't go back there, right? I mean, we could spend an hour talking about, the way American politics has gone in the past 10 years, but there's still a lot of danger out there. And there's a lot of, I think the Trevor Project just released this report that it's a state of emergency right now because there's so many pieces of legislation that are anti-gay and anti-queer and anti-lesbian. And we still have a lot of work to do, but we also have come a long, long way. And it's so important to remember. And this movie, it's really interesting because it takes a look at really serious things, but of course plays it comedically. Like even the scene where there's like a flashback where clearly, as a child, Guy Pearce's character was either almost or was getting sexually abused. And I remember watching it going like, oh no, we're going to go really dark here. And I'm not ready for that. But then, it turns it around by the end of the scene. It's wildly comical and the guy gets exactly what he deserves and it's wonderful. And that's the exact kind of movie it is that it'll take some serious topics and then it'll kind of reel you back in, be like, yeah, that is bad, that is a problem, but we're here to have fun and look fabulous and go across the country, and that's what we're going to do. So let's get back to it.
I wasn't that younger than you guys at this point, but I had teammates who were parochial school teachers and they were terrified of losing their jobs, terrified being found out, so they couldn't adopt, they couldn't have any kind of marriage, they didn't have marriage rights, how did they do their legalese, their insurance, and they were really truly terrified. And there was a lot of hate crime stuff that was going around at the time. And we talked previously, like Some Like It Hot and Tootsie and The Birdcage. What we love is they're so genuine. And one of the things I disliked about To Wong Fu is that I always felt that was kind of like that Benny Hill, let's make fun of, it's Patrick Swayze in a dress, it's Wesley Snipes in a dress, and I thought that's
stunt casting. That's totally
not why we're here. Even and Priscilla, there are so many times that there are so many things that are so tender and so touching, but then you do find yourself laughing, and you think I shouldn't be laughing at this, but it's like it's okay to laugh. And just like the after, and it starts out, there's all these funny moments, but then you have the very serious dark moment where Felicia decides to dress up and go out to like the barbecue, and there's that they're going to attack her, and then Bernadette is comforting her, and he says, it's not easy to be a man one day and a woman the next day, and he says, don't let it drag you down, which I feel like if it was made today, or if it was made in the past, that would be the joke. That would be the punchline of like, oh, haha, look at the pun on the word drag. But that's not the joke in the scene. You're not even thinking about that at that point. He's saying, that Sydney keeps us safe, that this is a separate world. It keeps us safe. Does it keep us in, or does it keep them out? And then you have the cutaway to the picture of the queen, where previously they had been making a joke about saying, well, can a queen raise a child? They say, well, the queen did good with Charles, but Edward is still a worry. And it's like, that's the pun of the
now
movie.
He's eating a sausage.
So it's like, there you have this really serious moment. He's just taken drugs. There's just been like this assault, and it's really heavy. And these are the two that didn't get along. They're so back in your kettles, both of you. They didn't get along. And here now it is the old queen who's effectively taking care of the young queen. And then it cuts away to the picture of the queen, and you're like, I shouldn't be laughing, but this is such a warm, tender moment. And I love that the movie just hits those notes correctly. And it's very funny because Felicia is such a little punk, and And he even says, like, I enjoy getting a rise out of people. And when he's singing the little song in the beginning, and he says, like, we're going to go on the desert holiday. I can't sing it because it's JD. I'll have to bleep everything. But he says things like, we'll take the ecstasy. And a lot of the things that he says foreshadows a lot of the events that happen. Because, and even Mitzi says, there's two things I don't like about you, Felicia, your face. And he says, you know, and he'll say, like, hey, you have a wife stashed out there. You don't have a kid out here, do you? You know, and it's like, these things that he says that he's upfront and outspoken about do foreshadow the events in the film. And that is why his up attitude, Bernice says, he's a performer 24/7. And that's part of what I love about the film, that mix of movie magic and facade. Like, they do all have multiple names as well. They've got their given names, their chosen names, their stage names, and the idea that when they dress up is more who they are. So I love the juxtaposition of, like, there's the hate, the attempted violence scene, but right before that is when you get where they meet up with the Aboriginal group.
I loved that scene.
Like, my favorite scenes, because it's so funny.
Beautiful.
I would drive my father crazy watching this movie over and over again, and he'd be like, "Yeah, it's funny." He's like, "But they're not that good. The performances aren't that good." And I'm like, "But I think that's the point. That is the reality." But in the beginning of the movie, when he's singing the goofy, that goofy "Never Been to Me," and they've got the priest of the stupid fake little doll, and like, what is going on in this song? This is like a ballad. Like, what are you talking about? You know, and it's raining, and you know, and you just feel like this life doesn't seem very good, or they don't seem very happy. It doesn't seem like it's that good of a living. But then when they get out and they are dressed up and they're singing and dancing and everybody joins in, it's just the idea that these are both groups that are supposed to be outsiders, and yet they can come together and just have a great time. And it's like, it's so beautiful. It's so beautiful. You know,
it really is.
You know, and I could just keep going. I mean, there's so many things, like,
and
their costumes and how much they're actually showing and what they're actually performing. There's so much of, like, this is a movie, this is facade. It's all about the illusion. Dave?
Yeah, I was just going to say that you brought up that scene with Felicia and Bernadette after the hate crime. Let's call it what it is. And not only does she say, don't let it drag you down, she says, let it toughen you up, right? Because if we are going to live a life like this is a reality that we have to be ready for. And I think every out queer person knows exactly what she is talking about. And I love that idea, because it's so easy to let hate drag you down, to let it make you want to give up and not be who you are, or at least not be loud about who you are. And that is not what Bernadette is saying. She's not saying, oh, you shouldn't be loud, you shouldn't be proud, you shouldn't be who you are. She's just saying, if you are going to be loud, you have to be ready. You have to get tough, because it's going to be tough, but it's going to be rewarding in the end. And I watched that this time. It was just like, I kind of took this like inhalation of breath, like, oh man, we all need to hear that every once in a while, because like, as far as we've come, there are still monsters out there. Like, there are still bad things that happen, and we have to be ready if we're going to be out and proud about it. And it's a very quiet, beautiful moment in the midst of all this nonsense, right? And the other thing I kept thinking when I was watching this movie, man, Guy Pearce is really attractive. Is a good looking, the arms, and it's funny because it made me think of when I first saw Guy Pearce, which was LA Confidential. That was the first thing I ever saw him in, but it was after both of these movies had come out. So both of these movies are already out. And I remember there's that first shot of him in LA Confidential. And my first thought, I said it out loud to a friend of mine, was like, my God, those cheekbones, Jesus, like, you look like you could cut glass. That is amazing. And then I saw this and I was like, oh, okay, this makes sense. This casting makes sense.
Those cheekbones. Yeah, which cheekbones are we talking about? I mean, half the movie, he's half.
I mean, that's true. I mean, but if I look like that, I would not wear clothes either. So I get it. Like, you know, if you got it, flaunt it, go for it, Guy. Like, no shade.
Yet I like that they cast men who no one would consider effeminate to play these characters. And like I said, just so many good choices, because again, people, it does break stereotypes, and breaking stereotypes in 1994, because in 1994, I had friends that were gay. that was pretty much it. I didn't know that there are people that do drag who are straight. I didn't know that, if you think about it, they have a bisexual character, a gay character, and a transsexual character. And those are all three very different things.
Yeah.
And they were all explored and they were all treated with respect.
Mm-hmm.
And that they didn't just take effeminate looking men, they took very masculine men, because I didn't know, again, when I saw this before LA Confidential, but when I saw LA Confidential, it wasn't like, oh, that's the guy from Priscilla, Queen of the Desert. No, not at all. It wasn't until after the fact when I looked up Guy Pearce, because he was so hot. And I was like, wait, what? He was one of those guys?
Mm-hmm.
And I really loved that. And I think I appreciate it more. And just getting back to, I know I'm slipping into like public service announcement, Amy Thomasson right now, but with understanding where we come from so we don't go back. During a lot of the women's rights that were taken away in the past year, my mom, who went to college and stuff in the 60s, was like, young women today have absolutely no idea how hard we had to fight to have a credit card in our names and to be able to divorce our husbands and those sorts of things, because we take it for granted.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, if you do a little research and you realize women didn't have those things until the 1970s, and now those things are slowly being taken away, and not just pro-choice, pro-life, but things like credit cards, things like that. And it's very scary. And that's why we need these movies. We need these things to be like, hey, don't sit on all the work that we've done, because you take it for granted now. These things that we didn't have 20 years ago. So you better make sure that you all get out and that you keep voting and keep fighting. Sorry, there's my public service announcement.
No, it's an excellent point. Like when these things started to really come to fruition with, you know who in office, what I remember, other than like just blind rage, is thinking about the women and men who fought for women's rights during the 60s, 70s, 80s, and how disheartening that must be. All of that hard work, and now we're back to, not back where we were necessarily, but we're moving in that direction. And that is really frustrating. And that's why history is so important. And I think that's why there are movies that come out every year that are, they're history lessons, they're homework. But I'm so glad that they come out, even when I don't think the movies are very good, because I'm like, okay.
Ginsburg.
Right. It's one of those that, like, okay, maybe I didn't enjoy it, or I already know about this, but then I realized, like, yeah, a lot of people don't. A lot of people have no idea, and they need, a movie with, Army Hammer in it for some godforsaken reason. So they'll go see it, and then they'll hear, and even if they get like 10% of what the movie's going for, that's more than they had before, because it irks me, but I fear we are in a generation of non-readers and non-studiers. And that's not just the youth, that's people my age and people a little bit younger as well. So we need movies, and we need, God forbid, TikTok to teach us some things that maybe we've forgotten, or maybe we've never learned. These lessons, if we don't learn them, we are, it's that old saying, like, those who don't learn history are doomed to repeat it. Like,
and
this is where we are.
Yeah, you look at states where now they're starting to ban books because they're considered woke about the civil rights movement, pioneers in the women's movement. And let's just say I watched the recent documentary that just premiered on Amazon, that there's a whole generation of young people who are looking to really turn back the clock, and they're taking over the Senate, and they have a very different agenda. And I'm glad that I know about this now, but I mean, I've always voted, but it's scary. And there's a lot of people who don't vote.
Yes,
a lot of
millions.
women, a lot of people of color, because they think, what's the point? And it's like, this is the point. I can get a credit card in my name. I can go to an Ivy League. The Ivy League wasn't even completely, all of them were not completely co-ed until like the 80s.
A lot of women's sports is getting cut out. There's all kinds of issues
Mhm.
there. You can't, women can't go to college for sport anymore. I wrote about Priscilla for InSession Film, and in my mind, this has always been my standard go-to of like, I wish if people could be identified as bigots, walking around with bigot on their head, wearing their red hats, I wish
For example.
Every homophobic person could just see this film and just be cut off at the pass, catch them at the right moments. I don't even care that the film is actually kind of anti-women, that every mother, wife, ex-wife, every female, there's a nasty old lady who says, we don't serve people like you, and that again came from the director having those encounters in real life, people coming up to him in restaurants saying, you don't belong here, get out. And of course they do the nasty graffiti on the bus, and then of course you get the big Bernadette saying, well, blow your box apart. I don't even mind.
I had to pause it.
It's the only bang you're going to get.
Laughing. I had to pause it and then just finish laughing and then calm down and then watch the rest of the movie.
It is a wildly anti-woman
scene.
That
to memory.
But it's so funny.
It's
so good.
And the delivery.
Just so deadpan. Terrence Stamp just kills it in that sequence.
To you folks before the thing, like there are so many parts of this movie that come into my head. Like, yeah, come on, like when I need to get out of bed, I think to myself, come on, girls, get up off your couches. Like there's just so many things, like little things, like when my cat puts her butt in my face, I think of like come on, what's wrong with you? Your face looks like a cat's ass. So many zingers in this movie, and it's like the script is both so tender and so touching and has such genuine things from every character, and yet there's such cattiness, and it is anti-women. Like for as boisterous as Felicia is, she doesn't like when the wife shows up and all of a sudden is barging in and talking so loud, and you can tell she's kind of jealous. And before we started, I said to Amy, I think Mitzi and Felicia end up a couple, and I think that's also part of it throughout the movie. There's little strains of that, so there's a lot of negative womensness, but I don't mind that because we need to have this kind of tenderness and compassion for the assorted type in this community. And it is funny because it is such a bi erasure, and they do say things like, so are you a man, are you a woman, or are you married, so do you bat for the other team or don't you? But it's like, so even if they're getting that conversation a little wrong, it's like, but that conversation needs to be had. And it's funny, Guy Pearce even putting his foot in his mouth on Twitter. He's asking these kind of questions of like, would this be made today? Do you have to be, what does your sexuality have to do with what you're doing in an acting performance? And he got, forced to apologize. And it's like, because Twitter, all kinds of anti people immediately jumped on him. And it's like social media, you can't even have this kind of conversation. And that's why I always point people to this film of like, no, just see this movie, because this movie has like so many of these touching little things. And even it's wrong to laugh, the dead naming that he uses in the movie is so wrong. Like he's teaching the little boy at the end, and it's like such a tender moment. Bye, they're waving at the bus, and then he's shouting the name, and you're like, no.
And doesn't he? But even that, it didn't seem, I mean, literally it's dead naming, but I don't feel like it was done out of disrespect. It was more like that character being a horse's behind and liking to just antagonize him rather than I don't acknowledge, you know what I'm saying? It just was, Felicia's kind of an ass and she's going to do that.
Bernadette beats him for it. They get into a big fight over it,
And I remember the little rhyme or limerick that Felicia makes up. And I feel terrible because it did make me laugh. Yeah, I did laugh because it was funny.
And a thing we haven't even gotten into yet, the music in this, the soundtrack is amazing. Now you sit back and think, how did they afford these clips? And there's even just the funny little things of like when Felicia is driving the bus and he's trying to jam on the brakes when Bernadette is trying to put her lipstick on, and the Billy, don't be a hero, don't be a fool with your life. It's like playing in the background, and you're like, this egging on. It's like the music and like the bus jerking, and it's like so cute, And then sometimes it's really terrible when he's on top of the bus and he's like, oh my God, I thought it was Bernadette driving, sorry, we do have to talk about Terrence Stamp because for me, yes, it wasn't necessarily falling in love with Guy Pearce in this movie. It was when I saw LA Confidential and then saw this again and was like, wait, that's the same person. Like, wow, okay, wow, that's, actor. There were some memes going around on Twitter, and I even did like King and Queen Felicia to when he's in the King's Speech, like get you an actor to do it all. But Terrence Stamp for me blew me away. And this was when I was a teenager. I was into classic film. Goodfellas, how did Goodfellas, not win even more awards? And I had one of those old, like every year you had to get like those Hollywood, like blockbuster movie books or something to see what the awards were. You couldn't look stuff up on the internet. Right. I saw this movie and I was like,
we all had those books.
I'm like,
that's why we're all here today.
Yeah, I had to go look up every book. I'm like, Terrence Stamp won all the awards for this, right? Nothing, absolutely nothing, which was the first like nail in me of like, why do the awards get everything wrong? I thought it was an absolute stunning performance. Still, Superman 2 are still some of my favorite comic book movies. And he was just so amazing in this movie. Just the mannerisms, the attention to detail, but it's also hysterical at the same time. Like when he walks off in the desert when the bus is broken down, and it's like as long he's got the little hat and he's wearing like heel little shoes, and she stops and is checking her makeup and doing her lipstick and her compact while like the flies are buzzing around. And you're like, it's so adorable, I
was so worried about her. I was like, you have no water, be safe.
But it's because it's silly and like reading about all the documentaries and the behind the scenes of like they took pictures, mirrors away. They didn't show Terrence Stamp the dailies because initially he was really, really struggling with it. And then they do have the one scene where they were filming right before when the woman does come up and does the ping pongs ball show, where he said, I can't do this anymore. I'm not feeling this character. It's because they used real local extras. And he said, I'm scared. And then he said, once he hit that fear, he understood the character. And after that was completely embracing of it. But they were afraid to show him the dailies because they said they felt bad that he wasn't a good looking woman. Which you're not even thinking that in the movie. You're just kind of like, oh, okay. And then there's also funny, like she's got to eat her hormones, like that's
her bowl of pills,
her nails and her hair. She's got to take her earrings off, so still like such a beautiful, tender performance of like, okay, wow. And I remember being so infuriated. He did not win awards for this. Like, no.
Oh, the Academy didn't get something right. Unbelievable. So shocking to me. Yes. Especially in a movie not made in America. Like, come on.
But it was 94. So it would have been up against 94. And this is just
it's a Murderer's Row year. I mean, that's
the supporting actors for that year.
Yeah.
Anytime I think, man, how did Samuel L. Jackson not win for Pulp Fiction? That's impossible. That's preposterous. He lost
until you watch
Ed Wood. Oh,
that's really good. Yeah, I had that same reaction because I did not see Ed Wood the year it came out, and I was like, Pulp Fiction. Of course, I'm like, a 15-year-old boy. This is the perfect movie, right? And I'm like, who could possibly be better? And then I watched Martin Landau, and I was like, that was really, really good. Dang it.
And I think what's his name?
That long to win. Why
Edward Norton for Primal Fear was that year. Leonardo DiCaprio for What's Eating Gilbert Grape. I mean, these are like
classics of the form.
I will go on record as saying the 1994 Best Supporting Actors lineup is.
It's hard to beat.
All of them could have won. Paul Scofield for Quiz Show.
Oh, yeah.
Although I would have put in John Turturro instead of Paul Scofield.
Yes. So I was thinking about the dead naming thing, and I want to be very careful with how I say this because I'm not a trans person. But I was alive in 1993 or 1994, and I don't think the conversation about dead naming was so specific as it is now. I think this is another issue of the context of the time. I think if you make a movie in 2023 and you have one of your beloved characters dead naming the other, I think we have a much different reaction. But for the time, this was silly and funny. And this character does enjoy getting under people's skin. And he's like, so he makes me think of, I always heard when the Kevin Smith movies, like Jay and Silent Bob, right? Jay, he's very hard to get mad at because he has like no moral barometer. Like he's not mean. He's just a he's just a jackass. And so is Felicia. Like, just kind of like, I'm just going to say whatever gets a reaction. So it doesn't come from a place that's malicious. It just comes from a place where it's like, I'm a little bored and I'd like to start a fight. So I know this will do it.
Yeah.
So I'm going to call you Ralph. And that's what we're
it
going to
doesn't
do
come
today.
from transphobia at all.
Right.
It comes from this character loves to push buttons.
Yes, absolutely. Totally. And
You know, I love the flashback scenes that we get for each character because they're both accurate and inaccurate, I feel, because Bill Hunter asks her, Bob asks her, why, the $64,000 question, and and she's saying to Mitzi, like, I had a happy childhood. I liked my parents, but they stopped talking to me once I had the chop, and I've learned not to let it bother me. And there's at Christmas where he's changing the cards and he's making sure he gets the dolls, and it's really funny. It's not credited. The actress Marion, who plays the wife, is also playing the mother in that flashback. And then there's also flashbacks of when they're getting married and who's in the suit, or when the baby's born and he's wearing the crazy, stuck in the crazy.
So good.
So
I love that, smoking the cigar.
But it's like, even when they're telling the truth about who they are, there is like a little bit of either movie making or they're changing up their memories. Because I've always wondered about that, about the Felicia is I don't know that it ended in the way he's originally playing the scene funny. Oh, he was stuck there for hours, and he got what he deserved.
Ha 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 ha.
No, I'm 100% sure that was not how it actually ended.
Yeah, it's like you're both seeing the core of these people, but yet it's also like how they've kind of justified it among themselves. And so it's a very, again, very beautiful insights that are coming into these characters compared to just Benny Hill running around, kind of silly, stupid. So, I love those kind of little things. And that goes with like the facade, like the costumes are the only thing that win the awards. And you get to the big, of course, it's called Finally, when they finally actually get to perform their shows after their road trip. And you think it's like a montage of everything they're doing. And then you find out it's only one night. And you're like, wait, what? There's no way they could have changed into these elaborate performances. You see Mitzi like sewing all the time. And you're like, there's no way that they actually made all these costumes, and you're aware of like the movie magic and the facade. And it's really, really touching. We haven't even gotten into it yet, that Mitzi, who again is called Anthony, he's called Tick, Mitzi, he has a son and he's nervous. You could say the whole point of the movie is he's going on this road trip and he's got to go tell his son he's gay. And it's also really frank. There are some of the moments we do get nice from the mom. She works, she runs the hotel, his wife, where she says, I'm tired, I need a break, you take him for a while, I can't deal with this right now. And he doesn't know how to say to his son, and his son just says, I know you're the best in the business. He says, well, he knows I'm in the cosmetics, makeup, entertainment industry. Like, what is that? That whole running joke about the woman makeup that's going through the whole thing. And the little kid just does not seem to care. He's not. He's like, oh, whatever. You're the best. I really like to see the show. And of course, when they finally get back in the hotel rooms, there's one funny scene where Felicia is sitting there with him playing with toys, and he's got one sock on and one sock off. So what kind of privacy he wanted to do in his room after the bus when he was up with the kid. And then of course he's also, I guess your dad doesn't really like girls. And he's like, well, does he have a boyfriend? Well, mom had a girlfriend. He's like, yeah, you want to come play with some Legos? And they become like the best BFFs.
Yep.
And when they start singing Mamma Mia on the bus, a flood of warmth, head, toe.
Charming.
It killed me. And also, and I'll say this again, I love, I don't even know what to call the character, the dude from The Matrix, Bernadette.
No, that's,
yes.
No,
that's
thing is Mitzi.
Mitzi. Okay. Sorry. Like I said, there's so many names. It's like a Russian novel. But Mitzi's relationship with his wife, that his wife talked about him in such a respectful way.
Right.
I love that. And I guess in some ways I almost relate to that. I'm divorced from my husband, but that's how we are. Like he takes my son to buy me gifts. We go out for Father's Day, the four of us. We go out and get pizza. We do all of those things together. And so I'm also a teacher, and I have kids who are like, wow, you still talk to your ex-husband? Like, is that totally weird? And I'm like, no, I see him every day. He sees his children every single day. Right. And they're like, oh, I haven't seen my dad since I was 6. And it rips my heart out. And so to see this movie where he knows
relationships,
yes, you like to wear crazy costumes and perform, and mom says that you're the best at it.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's not like the mom's like, oh, you're this deadbeat loser and he's yours now. It's like, I need a bit of a break. Just take him it's like for a couple of weeks. Get to know your son. And so it's not you're a loser, I hate our kid, he's so awful, I'm so angry. It's just like, guess what? You get to know your son. And then I also get to be, it's kind of like a woman moment of I've been carrying this load and now you can take care of him and I'll get a little bit of a break for the first time in like 8 years or whatever.
You say anti-women in that regard, but yet you also have Bernadette really also hitting on a lot of women relationships. She's worried about being older. She had a younger husband who died. There's jokes that are also like cut out of the movie about how exactly he died, why he was called Trumpet, but she says it's just he was a kid who liked transsexuals. He thought it was a gag, and she spent all her money waiting for a sympathetic husband. And then she does kind of like Bob when they pick up the mechanic Bob, but she's like,
he's so old.
So
and
she's like,
Who didn't love Bob though?
Batting your eyelashes at him. It's so charming, so sweet, not just as what's a man, what's a woman, who's supposed to be who, just that they're both older people looking for love. It's so touching, and then he was get the mail order bride flashback of like, oh, how he was somewhere and they had something kinky and he signed the papers and that's it, that's that.
But that it's true that he was, Bob's not my type, because he goes for the young, pretty boy. And Bob is this real, he looks, if he was American, you'd say he was a real redneck, kind of white trashy. And yet I love how he talks to Bernadette. He's such a gentleman and really talks to her with a lot of respect. And you were one of the, what is it? Leg girls?
Leg girls.
Mm-hmm.
And just, I'm so honored to meet you, ma'am. And you see Bernadette a little bit like, whoa, I'm not this old, this old relic that's after young men. I'm a beautiful, strong woman, and this man is appreciating me in a way that I've never been respected before. I love it.
He does say things like, what are you guys doing off the road? Or you blokes better be careful. And then he says, sorry, you girls. And he knocks on the door when he enters with the flowers. And I love the way where they've got like their hair, their makeup is half on. And she's like, there's somebody out here wearing like a piece of corrugated iron. At least Broken Hill, they had a Kmart. And I like the way like Bernadette like does this little hairy little trot away from the door. Like it's just so cute. There's so many little things to see like that. And the costumes are the only things that win. And they piece those costumes together because the costume designers like mom had like a discount. She worked at Kmart. So half the stuff they bought was like tacky crap from Kmart. The bus, I think, is so ugly the way it's decorated with the zebra print. There's so many little things to see that just kind of add
the flip-flop dress
to them. And I said to you before we started, Amy, because to me, Mitzi and Felicia end up a couple. The whole thing that the reason Felicia is jealous, saying, well, do you have a wife? What do you have a kid stashed out there? What did she put a bucket on her head and fly off the handle? You're like, wait, what? Hers and hers bath mats, because there's little sparkles. And again, I've seen the movie hundreds of times. Now you have to go watch it again to see what I'm talking about. There's always like these little tinglings or little sparkles or little glitter that shows up around Mitzi all these different times. And you just don't really notice. You think maybe it's the shine on the sequins or something. But then you do get to the end where Felicia is miming the ABBA and she says, when I look at you, I can hear a bell ring. And I'm like, yes, the whole point that you're seeing this is that, maybe he kind of has a little crush on Mitzi and doesn't want to like say anything, like, and to me, they're a couple at the end. They are dads raising.
Well, and Mitzi's ex-wife makes a comment as they're leaving and says like, basically like, he's great. And if you play your cards right, it could be you that ends up with him. Like, and I think the writing maybe didn't do quite enough for everyone to see that connection, unless you've seen the movie in triple digits, right? So they throw that line in there just to get you to think about it a little bit, like, oh, maybe there is a thing there. Because there's like, one of you mentioned there's this like genuineness and cattiness, and my first thought was like, yeah, if you hung out with gay people, that's what it is. This is what we do. And I think some of that comes from what Bernadette talks about, like, let it toughen you up. You do have to be a little tough to be queer, especially to be queer in the 80s and 90s, you had to be a little tough. So you had to have your guard up. But when you find your people, you have to be genuine too. And I think this movie does just such a wonderful job of showing all the sides of that. Like there's a scene after Guy Pearce's character has gotten beat up where Mitzi is just like, oh, this is the best. I can say anything I want and you can't talk. This is wonderful. Your fashion is horrible. Like it just, and I'm like, oh, that's my friends. I could definitely see myself having that conversation.
Again,
like
it should be
His
kind
face
of
is all wrapped up.
Yeah, should be kind of serious scene, but then like
Right.
like when Bernadette is trying to like push them away from the bonfire so she can have a night with Bob, and you're like, it should be serious, but I can't help but laugh because here's Felicia sitting in the background with like the bags
Right.
around.
But then poor Bernadette leaves her cake out in the rain. It's tragic. I do love a good Donna Summer reference. Like that's pretty fantastic.
Yes, I don't care if the sun does it. Yeah, all the music is just so wonderfully also accenting each tender, each humor. Like a great, like today, everything is always so up, a gag a minute. Everything had to be funny. But I love the way this is up and down and the music kind of punctuates those beats. And there's so many little things to see, like the alcohol that they keep in the medicine cabinet.
So good. So good.
Even going through the credits, there's some goofy things in the credits while it's the costume designer who's actually dressed up saying this is how it's supposed to be, like really actually well done. Because that's what I said. It's so funny is they're kind of not that good of the drag queens, but it's like, that's not even the point. They're just trying to be
and the story brings you through it. You don't have to be the perfect performer for us to care. It's one of the things I love about this is that it is unpolished and it is just these three queens who are amateurs, who are not, they're not going to be the ones who, for a now reference would be on Drag Race, right? They're not at the top of their game, but they're passionate about what they do and they love it. And that's enough. It's enough to bring us through that they love what they do and they just want to perform. And it makes him nervous to do that in front of his own child, because his kid doesn't know him. And I just think it's so beautiful that instead of having the easy route, the easy drama of the kid, like, oh, I don't like you, this is gross and this is weird. The kid's just like, okay, you like boys? Cool. Like, and that's it. So there's all this buildup, right? And there's
it's not about the kid coming to terms with having a gay dad.
He doesn't care. He doesn't care. And it's also, they set it up almost, you feel like there's going to be this big blowout between him and his ex-wife. And then like he gets there and she's just like so happy to see him and jokes with him and, gives him crap, like just kind of needles him a little bit like friends do. And you could tell that, when they got married, they loved each other, but it wasn't this knockdown, drag out fight. You could just imagine it is as he says it is, that they talked about it and she realized that he liked boys and they're like, okay, you take this ring, I'll take that ring and we'll go our separate ways. It'll be fine. And you could see that relationship in the 10 seconds when he first gets there. It's beautiful.
When they get, and they have all the private jokes and everything. And it's like, and the other two are watching him like, who is this person? Because it's this whole different person because he has all these different personalities. And again, that's something else I haven't really seen in a lot of movies. And with the fact that they're not supposed to be super polished, it reminds me of how Sally Bowles in Cabaret, the Broadway version, is supposed to be. Yes.
Right.
That being said, the movie's one of my favorite movies. Liza Minnelli's one of my top 3 best actress winners of all time because she's perfect. But yes, these aren't the most sophisticated. They're not going to New York. They're going to the backwoods.
It was made for a couple $1 million. They expect us not to be polished, but they don't underestimate their audience either. And I love the idea of what is the illusion. Like when at the end when you see the shoe on the road sign, and even the idea of like the shoe being on top of the bus, because there are times when you see the shoe on the bus on the top and it's turned to one side and there's like all the luggage is stacked over top of it. And you think, why in the heck is he on the top of the bus dressed up with the stuff out the back? Then there's the second time where it's the red smoke flying out. Why is he wasting all their effects and all their stuff? And then when you see the montage, with the Sydney, frame Marie Antoinette light up kind of stuff and the emu stuff, like they're falling and they're messing up, and you're kind of like, which part of it is the movie making magic and which part of it is reality, and how much of this is all an illusion, because in the beginning it was very crappy when they were singing in their regular club, but then at the end you get everybody loving the ABBA show. So the idea is like, it doesn't matter which is reality and which is illusion, because we've been on this journey with you, and it's so touching. And then while they're on their road trip, there's also that stupid thing about the running lady with the light behind her.
What is happening? I have watched this movie so many times. I still have no idea why that is happening. And I love that Felicia is like, what the like, as we all are, like, just what is happening right now?
There's so many random stupid things. And the kite, why do the three yes, bi, gay, trans, why is there a blow-up doll on the bus that then they use for a kite? Which the end of the movie, if you stay after the credits,
I was gonna say, did you watch the stinger at the end? Yes. This monk, like, it's so random. It is more random than any Marvel post-credit scene. Like, just what is happening, right? It's beautiful.
So many stupid, silly. Of course, the ABBA turd. You're like, wait, what? Because the first time I saw it, there wasn't subtitles, their accents, and I'm like, ABBA. I'm like, wait, the band ABBA? Because I'm a Bee Gees, the diehard person, and I'm like, wait, ABBA, and I'm like, wait, what is he saying? What I think he's saying?
Yes, yes.
Are
you telling me this is an ABBA turd? It's maybe like my favorite Terrence Stamp moment, like just so deadpan, like, what are you saying right now?
Purple.
What
it's
is
lavender? If you think sit here and wait around while what is it? He even says, what is this, Benny Hill in the Outback? Like, they themselves are like so self-aware. It's just so wonderful. It's so touching.
Yes.
To me, it's a movie that just keeps on giving. I absolutely adore it. Amy, now are you going to watch it 101 times?
I am. I definitely want to see it again, because I definitely missed some of the stuff that you guys saw, but the ends just, and again, watching it now as a single mom who has a 10-year-old son, it hits you at different points of your life. It's one of those kinds of movies, and I love it. And I'd love to think my son, who we have gay friends who are married and adopted kids, and it's just, and this is the discussion you have. Hey, what does it mean to be gay? Well, your two uncles, well, they're married. They're in love with each other. Oh, okay. That was it.
That's it. Yeah.
It's not this sit down and have a discussion. This is how it is. There's men who get married. There's men and women who get married. There's women who get married. Like,
there's non-binary people that get married.
And the more, exactly. And the more you make it an issue.
Right. They pick up on that. The kids are going to pick up on that. I remember
when my son was 5 and I was painting my nails, and he's like, oh, that looks cool. Can you paint my nails? Okay. Sure. He looked at it, and then 10 minutes later, he's like, okay, can you now get this off?
Okay, I'm done now. Yep.
We didn't have to have an hour and a half conversation about gender. It was just
right. It's like, well, if you put this on, this is what this. No, it's just no.
And let's talk about gender norms and stuff. No, he really just kind of thought it looked neat because his mom, who he loves, was doing it,
Yep, absolutely. Yeah.
Between a Frock and a Hard Place is the documentary they made. That's maybe like 10 years old now, but it was after the movie, like an anniversary documentary of the movie. And they're talking about, the whole history of how it went from hate crimes in Australia to being like this entire industry, drag in Sydney, to now this being a completely, beloved film. And I've said it before on the podcast, because like, we're also literary folk of like, to me, like, there's no such thing as reading a bad book. Yes, you could see a bad movie, but I feel like you've got an experience even when you read the book, even if you disliked it. And to me, I think you're still changed from when you've read a book. Great film will change you by the time you get to the end, so books do that. I think movies do that. And this is just one of those films that to me is like, has just kept on giving my whole life. It's just been such a wonderful, and that's not just because I'll follow Guy Pearce and everything, but that's probably why. But
I'll follow him into the gates of hell.
So different from my walk of life. I had no idea about the Australian drag scene.
Totally
stuff. I had no idea about any of this, and it's like, because I asked Amy before, when we were talking about Tootsie or the Birdcage and Some Like It Hot, I'm like, these are what people would quote, say, or drag films. And I'm like, but you can't, to me, I don't perceive them as that, is that they're just beloved, wonderful, genuine comedies that come from such a touching place that you can be from any walk of life. And they're still just so emotionally touching. This movie gets me every time. And my husband's like, I just bought this for you on this new Blu-ray set. He's like, why are we watching it on TV with commercials? And I'm like, because it's on.
It's on. That's right. That's right. And I do love that the documentary is an ode to maybe the best line in the entire film. Just what the world needs. A cock in a frock on a rock. It's
one
amazing.
Of the things I dislike about the movie is he says his dream is to climb Kings Canyon as a queen in a gown and a tiara and heels, and they don't. They're wearing like big feathered get-ups and boots and shorts climbing. And I'm like, no, I wanted it. I wanted a tiara.
You want him in the silver outfit that he wears on top of the bus.
Yeah, and and the bloopers, I also laughed so hard because they're trying to get up like the rocks and like the trees keep grabbing their feathers.
There's something so lovely about them in full drag and like hiking boots, like getting up on this rock. It's so wonderful and like just kind of messes with gender in the most fun way, and this movie is just, I think we all have those movies. I could probably come up with 5 or 10 movies that are barometer movies for me. Like if I sit you down and I show you this movie and you don't love it, we're probably not going to be friends. Like this is just it. There's a couple movies here and there that like, if you don't at least see the love and enjoyment in this, then we probably can't hang out. And that's okay. You can have your bad taste over there and I'll be over here with great movies.
Oh yeah. It's like the book/movie we talked about before we hit record. People who love
the opposite, the anti-barometer. Yes, that's.
And I want to, and it's so sad because I always want to say when people love the certain thing we're talking about, I'll never tell audience members at home what I'm talking about, but because hey, you like what you like. Bottom line. However, when someone says this, it's almost like that basically says everything I need to know about you.
Yep.
Everything I need to know about you. And I almost wish I didn't because of course I'm judging you a little bit.
Yeah. Oh no. And it's like, well, this is what you should judge people. I mean, like around here, of course, when elections were going off bad, everybody was having all these signs on the front lawn and all these flags. And I'm thinking, you're showing your true colors.
Yeah, I loved when I saw those flags. I was like, I know who the danger is.
Yeah.
That's
and
right.
I'm like, and I know I don't want to have anything to do with you. And it's like, you're showing, it's not, why are you going after people who are showing their rainbow, who aren't doing anything wrong when you were showing your true colors, that you were basically posting on your front lawn what a hateful human being you are. And it's like, bye-bye.
Yeah, I'd rather know who I'm safe being near. Like put up your, make America great signs, please. Yeah. I would like to know who to not invite over. So please go ahead. Yeah. Put those right up.
I'm done with people with the ignorance. I just want to talk about great movies.
Yeah. And this is one of them. It's so lovely. It was such a treat to have to watch this movie again. I was like, oh no, I have to watch Priscilla. How awful on a Tuesday night. The worst.
That's how I felt the past few weeks with the Birdcage. I was like, now technically, did I actually have to watch the Birdcage again?
Well, if you're going to be professional about your podcast,
I was going to be professional. And Some Like It Hot and Tootsie, are you kidding me?
Again. And I put in the disc, I watched all the features too. And I was thinking of like, my sister was a ballerina and she would, when I was watching this, she would stand in the background, like in our foyer with this hardwood floor, and she would do the whole routine and she'd like to imitate.
I love it.
My dad would be like, they're not even that good. It's not that good of a routine. And then my sister would be like, oh my God, Guy Pearce is so hot. And I'm like,
yep.
So I'm like, really? What makes you think that? I'm like, but how are you getting that out of this movie? Like, why bother thinking he's hot? He's such a bitch.
She's right. She's right. It's fine.
They also mention when they're rehearsing, Terrence Stamp's like, dude, this is like the oldest dance move ever. And he's rolling his eyes and he's like, these moves are lame.
Yeah. Even in the final performance, Terrence Stamp is kind of like,
It's so bad.
Okay.
It
I
is.
love
It's
that
not
when
great.
they're practicing and Mitzi like steps on Felicia's like mark and she gives him like the dirtiest look, like, excuse you. And then the whole stupid thing with like the Gila, like the dragon, snapdragon with like the
Amazing.
flaps and the
Amazing.
tails. And you're
The
like, and then
best.
in the features, they said like at that point it was near the end, and Terrence Stamp was like, "You're not dyeing my tongue. This is stupid." You could see that when he's just like wiggling like his feet and like
Incredible.
you're like, oh.
But how much more they come to life at the end when they do ABBA.
Yeah.
That's their
Yeah.
best song. And it was almost like they needed ABBA to fill them with joy. And of
The
course,
whole
that's
joke
what I
throughout
listen
the
to for the rest of
movie.
the
Like
episode.
he's like, we're not going to talk about wigs and boobs and clothes and penises and jewelry and bloody ABBA. And then he's like, but then we don't have anything to talk
Yeah,
about.
what are we? So silence, I guess.
Yeah, the way like they could all each hate each other at different times and yet all love each other at the same time. It's just like, oh, it's
Yeah,
just
we call that. We just call that
a
friendship.
beautiful movie.
Yes.
And again, even though, of course, the ABBA choreography, like one face turning, the other face turning. When I first saw this movie and they like step out of the frame and they come in with like Mamma Mia, I thought they were going to kiss. And I still am disappointed that they did not.
Every time.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's like every time I'm waiting, they're going to kiss this time. And no,
It's gonna change. It's finally gonna work out for me. No.
And that
Yeah. I mean, I truly think that if you have very close friends, like friends you share space with and have been with for a long period of time, if you tell me there's not at least one moment where you just can't stand them and despise them, I have a word for you. It's called liar. You're a liar. There's no way you could be that close and love someone that much and not have moments where you're like, I've had it with you,
Well-
right? The line between love and hate is just razor thin.
I've been on several Twitter conversation message threads with groups of some of our writers from InSession where they
I don't know what you're talking about. Nope. Thank
Yep.
God I don't have my own Twitter account anymore. I'm out.
I love it though. I love it. And I read it and I just laugh so hard and I'm like, I love it because that love, like you said, that love
Mhm.
is so real. And so anything you need.
You could just say Joey Gentile. We know who you're talking about. Like you could just say Joey. We all know it's
I
Joey.
don't even know what you're talking about, Joey Gentile.
Flat out,
Never
I
heard
said
of him.
to him, I finally said to him, like, you know what? I can't talk to you because I can never tell whether you are genuinely saying what you mean or if you're just being a flat out sarcastic ass. He's like, oh no, always take it sarcastic, always. And I'm like, but isn't that so tough to be like so up all the time? Like, doesn't it take too much damn energy? You know, like, no, I just want to love, I
Nope.
just want to love
That's
movies.
who he is. That's who he is. God bless him.
Love
That's the way
him.
God
And
made
then
him. He
I
can't
know.
help it.
love him more than life itself. And I've learned so much about him as a person. And then he, tells me, well, Vivian Lee's Academy Awards was like the worst double Academy Award winner of all time. I'm like, what are you talking about?
Joey has strong opinions. I always disagree with him, but like I respect it because like he
Of
really
course.
believes the
Is
nonsense
there-
that comes out of his mouth. He believes it, and God bless him.
Is
Like,
there another movie with like a famous Felicia line? Because there are so many times when something is going crazy on
bye,
Twitter.
Felicia.
Yeah,
Bye, Felicia. It's from Friday. Friday.
Okay.
is the-
Yeah. Oh, that's right. Oh, I love that
Yeah.
too. Because
Yeah.
I also think of this like Felicia, where the are we? Every time
Yes.
I'm lost in something, I'm like, wait, what? Like,
Where
no.
are we? What's happening? Yeah, I
But
felt like that a lot on Twitter, which is
Mhm.
why I left. I'm like, I'm good.
Mhm.
But when he referred to Belfast as Irish Roma, I'm still laughing about that.
I mean, he's not wrong in that.
He isn't wrong.
Wow.
So every now and then I'm like, yes.
Well, that's the old thing about the broken clock, right? Twice a day, it's right. Like that's
God
that's,
love him.
that's many
God
of our
love him.
writers at InSession Film just accidentally correct. Just
Yeah.
you found your way.
Yes, you put up with so much from us where I'm like, yeah, I'll do this. And like months later, I'm like, oh, remember the thing I was supposed to do? Like, yeah, was this okay? Was this good?
Look, here's the
Notice
thing.
there's gonna be a
Here's
lot
the
of
thing.
editing.
As an editor, I'm getting what I pay for. which is nothing. So I can't sit around and be like, well, your deadline, it's time. Like, what? You all have jobs, you all have lives. Like, I get it.
Write this summer. I need to write a bunch of pieces.
Yes. When I'm like, you may have to do a little more editing in this episode or not. I'm just saying, he handles all our tech stuff for us because I'm such not a technical person, and I always have these fears of like, oh wait, what we set up, we have to overcome the technical issues, do a sound check, like, wait, make sure I say everything right. And then I'm like, but I just love the movies. Even when I'm having like a bad time, I'm like, yes, we get to come talk about one of my favorite movies because I drag Zeta into having a whole Guy Pearce special. And I'm like, oh, look, we're going to talk about another Guy Pearce movie. Then I'm like, but it's so much bigger than that. It is, I love this movie so much. I never get tired of it. And then the songs get stuck in my head for some reason.
And like, I've had Mamma Mia in my head the entire episode. Just saying,
gets stuck in my head. Just shake your groove thing. When they're up on the bar and they're wearing pretty simple stuff and they pull like wigs off, and you're like, again, that's probably how the act really is. They just stand up on the bar in mind, and then they get pushed off and they've got the cassette that's labeled Cynthia that they're like, yes,
they're ready. They're ready. Yes, absolutely. I also just love, like, we kind of referenced it, but I Will Survive with a didgeridoo. Like, that's the best. It's so beautiful. And that amazing man who performs with them, who is the happiest person who's ever lived when he's dancing, like, it just melts my heart. Like, every time I see that sequence, I'm like, he's so happy. Look at him with his curly hair and his big smile.
Yes, along. Compared to, in the beginning, like when it's kind of rainy before the funeral, and like the crowd is shouting stuff at them, they throw stuff at them.
Totally.
And you're like, this is weird, this is sad. And then you've got Felicia comes up and says, yeah, the cord on this microphone is so long so I can get it back after I shove it up your ass. You're just like, okay. And then you're like, yeah, okay. Because right after that, Mitzi even says, oh yeah, you can make a fine living wearing heels. And it's like, well, maybe not. It seems like it's kind of crappy. He's got like the little Avon lady kind of thing on the side, but it's like the joy it brings them. And in that little moment where they're all at the bonfire, everybody's joining in and singing and dancing, and their costumes there aren't that elaborate. And I always wondered why he's got such an angry face when he's doing I Will Survive. But it's just, everything just like works. It's just so cute. Such a beautiful moment. Like, this is what it's about. I love that.
Absolutely. And I think you mentioned like these two outsider groups coming together. And I love it because there's these moments where the Aboriginal folk are kind of looking at them like, well, this is weird, but whatever, and then they just keep going, as opposed to the white folks who are like, this is weird and I have to punch something. Like, it's just such a different experience. And it's so beautiful. Especially if you look at
they're too marginalized group. You think about the Aborigines, which when I first saw the movie, I didn't know.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the history of the mistreatment of that group of people, I'm always kind of like, and this is, of course, coming from a white guy, like the most privileged group that you could possibly imagine, right? So I'm always kind of amazed that these groups of people that have been so mistreated tend to be the most welcoming, right? Where my group of people should be the most welcoming. We've got every damn advantage you can imagine, right? The only parts of myself that are not privileged are things that if I choose to, I don't have to tell people. You cannot tell by looking at me that I'm a queer person, right? But like all these other groups who have been so mistreated, and man, if you look into the history of the Aboriginal folk in Australia, it is violent and horrific, awful, and really
recent. This stuff was going on in like the 40s and 50s. This wasn't like 300 years ago.
Spectrum, The Proposition, 2005, gritty, excellent, disturbing, upsetting Western. I also wrote about it in InSession Film. It's the Broken Hill, the main drag, where they're all walking down the street. I love the nightlife is all playing, and people, it's like the shots of people looking at him and kind of giggling. And they get to the bar, and first, they don't fit in, but then they're singing, they're drunk and everything, and they think that they had a good time like the night before, but then they wake up with their hangovers, and that's when they've got the graffiti on their bus. And Mitzi, it's like you think it doesn't bother you think you can get over it, but it still always hurts.
Still there. Yeah.
And then Felicia's answer is to get it's not purple, it's lavender. And
right.
Where are you from? Uranus paints the bus.
By the way, if you haven't seen it and you want like a little taste of some of the difficulties of Aboriginal history in Australia, you should watch Sweet Country. I think it came out in like 2017, 2018. Absolutely beautiful, heart-wrenching film. Very different from the movie that we watched. Massively different, but just kind of amazing. So definitely recommend that one.
Rabbit Proof Fence is another one.
Yeah, it's another good one. Yeah. But that is a little more focused on the white folks than it is the Aboriginal folks, like the perspective.
Yeah.
Whereas Sweet Country is much more on the other side of the fence. So
we've also come full circle of calling this as an Australian movie a foreign film. I don't think films that are in English can technically be foreign, but the idea of how this time, the only other Australian film I had seen was The Man from Snowy River, which I also absolutely adore. and then you get people like Guy Pearce and Russell Crowe and Hugh Jackman kind of coming in, and you're like, wow, all these down under imports. But then it also, I don't know, Hollywood has gotten too closed off or something. I don't know, like we've got now Chris Hemsworth or something. But like the idea of like now there's so much quality shows, movies, TV from Australia that doesn't even make it to America anymore. I always had to wait when I wanted to see the Jack Irish seasons. I had to wait till they came out on Region 1 DVDs, and then I saw them and I'm like, I'm floored. I love this show. And like, unless you knew what it was, unless you have Eggcorn, you would never find the show. There's just so many great things that like you don't get to see. The Babadook, is that Australian or was that New Zealand?
Australian, I believe.
Okay. Because again, it's like, even horror movies at this point, I don't even look at mainstream horror movies anymore. I like to look at everything else, and I find I like British and Australian horror films better. So it's like the way that this movie kind of came out of nowhere, rode into town, blew everybody away, opened kind of the industry, but how now the industry has kind of closed off again, which I don't think is fair, because there's just still so much wonderful content, coming from everywhere that's telling.
It's because of streaming. Streaming sucks. That's why, because things just get buried and you never even know that they exist or where they are. So then we don't have to actually publicize things that are outside of America.
Not Proposition. David Michaux, the same director who did The Rover, did Animal Kingdom. Excellent film.
Oh, both.
Hardly anybody
both
saw
great.
it here. But then we had to
got a TV show.
Yeah. It was like really hard.
And speaking of our friend Joseph, he will die on the hill that Weaver should have won the Academy Award for that movie.
Yeah, when you watch that movie, you're just like, I can't believe this woman. What kind of woman?
She's terrifying.
This is
absolutely terrifying.
Horrible, and there's
I love that movie.
So many kind of, and I think I watched interviews with her talking about it, saying how she made backstories of like maybe they had different fathers, or what was her actual like inappropriate close relationships to some of these kids, and the way she was going to cut some of them off to favor another, send one to prison, get one to lie, gripping stuff. But then America's like, oh, we need to remake this, which nothing against the show, which even then it was like it was on TNT.
Everything against the show. It shouldn't exist.
It's like, but it's been canceled and did a lot of people see anyway,
I'm glad it got canceled. Watch the movie.
So
leave TV alone.
I think I posted pictures a while back on Instagram where I had to get this again. I saw it for 25 cents at Goodwill, a VHS of Priscilla, and it had a sticker on it that said "Win a trip to Australia." Funny. This is too funny. And I came home and I showed my husband. And I said, "Look," and he's like, "I just got that for you on Blu-ray."
It's like, how many copies of this do you need? Good Lord.
I've got like 4 copies.
Hey, as someone who has several copies of Goodfellas, and I remember the hardest thing in my divorce was my ex and I separating our DVD collection. And I was like, if you take the special edition of Goodfellas, you will be taking with you my will to live. Hey, guess what? We had two of the same thing.
So let me make you feel better. Let me make you feel better. In my divorce, my ex-wife took all of it without talking to me. All of it. I had to restart my
Spice
movie
Wars.
collection. So it could
Ooh,
be worse. It
Oh
could be
no,
worse.
that absolutely could be worse. We went through one by one, and I remember the movie Marty. I was like, I need you to write me a 3-paragraph essay explaining to me how much you love this movie,
The teacher,
and then
the
I'll
teacher
consider letting you
returns.
have it.
Good.
No, I
Because I'm a weirdo.
Be like, you can keep it. It's fine.
took
The whole DVD.
back then, Memento, it would come on TV, and back then you could do like a tape where you could get like maybe 3 movies or so if you had like extended play.
Oh,
And
yes,
tape
yes.
the movie more than once on the same tape, so I didn't have to rewind. I could just pause, and my sister'd be like, "Oh, I would."
That is
you couldn't look it
amazing.
up. But then you can look. I would take notes, and I would pause and like write down the tattoos. My sister'd be like, "God, he's so hot," and I'm like, "Well, if you're looking, can you tell me what's on that ab?"
Yeah.
Right?
Since you're taking a good look at Mr. Pearce, can we help me out?
My husband's like, "Don't you get tired of this?" I'm like, "Nope, nope."
No,
Absolutely not.
no.
Absolutely not.
Great film is great film. Dave, can I ask you then? Because I don't know, depending on when the timing will work out. We talked about Some Like It Hot, Tootsie, and The Birdcage. Do you have, your favorites of these kind of films, or any others that we're missing?
That's a broad
It's not
question.
too long through. If people bring that,
It's
one
not
up,
that. It's not
Yeah.
that. You know what is kind of an underrated queer film is Pride. Have you guys seen that movie? Pride? Oh, it's
No.
lovely. It's about the British miners' strike when Thatcher was in power, and how a bunch of queer folk came and helped them out and dealt with, the miners are like hardworking, gruff guys, and many of them have, pretty bad attitudes about queer folk. And it's so great. So lovely. It's fantastic. It makes me cry every time I watch it. It's very manipulative. Like, what it's doing, but it still kind of works every single time. I also really love Kinky Boots. That's another one of my favorites. Yeah, there's a lot of great queer cinema. Like, we've been here forever. We were here pre-code. And we, if you want to talk about, whatever happened to Baby Jane, that's a kind of a queer camp classic. Like there's lots of options, there's lots of opportunities out there. And then we look now, and I think we're very lucky to be in a time not only of movies but of television that really features amazing queer stories. Like if you watch something like Pose, which is the greatest thing Ryan Murphy has ever been involved in. I don't like Ryan Murphy very much, but he just depended on queer Black folk to actually make something good, and they did. So there's lots of options out there. Like there's lots of
a good point. If we talk about streaming, television at this time was kind of a lot less forgiving also. Like you reminded me of the big shock when Deep Space Nine had the alien, the symbiote, the Trill that could be in different bodies, and now it's in a woman. They're both in women's bodies. And the big shock of the kiss. And I'm like, this is not a good place to tell this story. It's not quite. At the time, it was like, oh my God, wow, they went there. And you're like, but now you look at it like they could have done better. And then you have things like Buffy, where you're like, I love, oh Lord, but now I'm having a moment, Willa Tara. But then when she gets killed, and then you had Basic Instinct of like, oh, it's just always angry killer lesbians, so there were a lot of like cliches at this time that needed to be overcome. And you have Priscilla coming around of like, these are just genuine people. It's the fact that they're drag queens is not like the be all end all of the characters, that it seems weird, the drag queens are people too, it is like, seems so simple, but it's like, but it's so true, and it's so touching. Amy, what were you gonna say?
But I was gonna say 2 things. But sci-fi has always been able to be ahead of the game. Wasn't Star Trek the first interracial kiss on television?
Sure was. Yeah.
So I feel like sci-fi of all the genres really is allowed to push the envelope. And what I didn't like in the 90s especially is that 2 men being together was, and I'm putting this in quote, gross. And yet in Basic Instinct, it's okay because it's 2 hot women, and it's done
for
to
the male
titillate
gaze,
a straight male audience.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that that's kind of gone by the wayside too.
Yeah.
because it was so gross. Like, well, no, actual lesbians are gross, but hey, it's okay
Right.
if it's Sharon Stone in
It's
her
okay if they're hot.
prime
Yeah,
in a
absolutely.
movie that's pretty much porn.
Yes, yes, true. And I was just thinking, you brought up like, okay, what are the great gay movies? We're actually in kind of a perfect time, right? I mean, if you look at in the last 10 years, you've got Portrait of a Lady on Fire, you've got Moonlight, go a little bit further, you've got Brokeback Mountain. Like these are all fabulous movies.
Call Me by Your Name.
Call Me by Your Name, which is a little awkward now with Armie Hammer being a friggin' monster, which is always difficult.
But you've got Chalamet, who
He's so good. He's so good.
When he says goodbye and he does that thing where he takes his hand and kind of he pushes his throat a little bit because he's really trying not to cry, just that natural instinct.
He's a really good little physical actor. Like he makes a lot of really interesting choices.
I don't like this whole trend of actors who are like little boys. Like I can't get over like when I saw that, I'm like, is he like 12? Even if I know he's meant to be like 20, I'm like, this is a little weird for me. No, but like,
Sure.
DiCaprio was that way.
Yeah.
Leonardo DiCaprio looked like a little boy pretty much until like Gangs of New York is when he started to kind of look like a grown up.
And Johnny Depp too. Like that is a thing.
I forget what year it was. There was a big miniseries ABC did called When We Rise. And it was all about all the riots and the movements. Guy Pearce is in also, and it's not available on DVD. You can only like buy online, digital owned, which so infuriates me. I'm like, no, I need a physical copy, But again, something that came out, it wasn't popular, or it was too risque, and it got buried. And I feel like that's only like 10 years old. And and I said before, I wait every time for them to kiss. If they had kissed at the end of this movie, it would probably have had no international distribution, would not have been accepted anywhere. You could not have had that then, which is sad to say.
Yep. Absolutely.
But speaking of queer movies, a movie that I love and totally now would be considered problematic, but for its time and starring two major stars is The Children's Hour with Shirley MacLaine and Audrey Hepburn.
That's 72?
No, that's like 61.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
That's old. However, Audrey Hepburn and Shirley MacLaine possibly playing lesbian lovers, risky for both of them. And I think it's actually probably one of my favorite Audrey Hepburn films because she's not using any of the charm. All the Audrey Hepburn charm is gone. She's just a woman. And
so glad Zeta is not here to hear someone say something good about Audrey Hepburn, because it would not go well.
She's not. I love her. She's iconic, but I'm kind of with Zeta on that. But I like this because she's not just pretty, effervescent Audrey Hepburn, that she's a woman who has a dear friend. And it's good to watch, even if it's just to learn how destructive, how destructive it was if someone called you out and accused
at that time. Yeah.
Your entire life is over.
Yeah. And like the way you said sci-fi, like I love genre. This is what I love the most about horror, the way it can reflect this mirror to nature without like all the innuendo, read between the lines, the coding that you can see, like Nightmare on Elm Street 2, but Australian film, something like Picnic at Hanging Rock. You're like,
great.
The teacher taking out these girls in this repressed Victorian, they disappear. Like what happened there? There's like, so these films have always been around. It's just the right audience have been able to find them. And I love that people can find Priscilla, whether they're looking for it or not. It's available.
Yeah. Now it's on Amazon Prime for free.
It's everywhere.
So.
It's everywhere. Yeah. Amy, have you could you rank some of the films that we've discussed?
Some Like It Hot coming in at number 1, and of course Billy Wilder, Resurrect, give me a call. Because it was so shocking, but yet not shocking, and just literally gets better every single time I see it, and I've seen it a lot.
Might be a perfect screenplay, honestly. It's so good.
Even the beginning with the funeral home and the stuff with the gangsters, when you're with the exposition, that's hysterical. Rigoletto, it's an opera, you ignoramus. Like, it's so funny. And then if we're talking like as far as queer films go, then I would probably put The Birdcage, then Tootsie, and then honestly, I would The Children's Hour, because that movie is very effective. And again, yes, it has the tragic ending and it falls into some of those tropes. However, this is 1961 and these are big Academy Award. They've both been nominated. Hepburn had already won. This is the year after The Apartment. Shirley MacLaine had never been bigger. And they were brave enough to do this.
So
even if, you know, it's not the most in-depth, but again, where we came from, where all a girl has to do is whisper a rumor and their lives are completely shattered.
is this Terrence Stamp's best performance for you?
I really have a weird fascination with The Collector. That was my first Terrence Stamp movie, and I was like mildly obsessed with it when I was in high school, which I don't know what that says about me, but I was.
Well, he did get the claim for that.
He is very good.
No, he was nominated for Best Actor, Golden Globe, musical or comedy for Priscilla. But
Is that a real award? Golden Globes? Does anyone care?
Does
Come on.
Does that count? Now, it was for the BAFTA too, as well, actually. But
Okay,
yeah,
that's
me,
all right.
Wow. Okay.
Superman, and then seeing this, like, yeah, blew me away. Blew me away. And then you get to see Hugo Weaving as Agent Smith after, and you're like, oh my gosh. I mean, that to me is, you know,
And LA Confidential was
acting
2 years later.
Mm-hmm.
He was so hot in that movie. Good Lord.
You could literally be talking about any movie right now, and I'd be like, yes, that is correct.
I think
Any movie he's ever been in.
I get angry when people say, oh, Priscilla, LA Confidential, Memento. What else did Guy Pearce do? And I'm like, where have you been the last 20 years? Like, come on.
Did they not listen to our Kate Winslet episode?
As far as I'm concerned. And for me to say, I wouldn't even consider him for a nomination for this, because I just thought he was gay. You know, and I don't know. I remember reading articles about him being some, you know, cool Aussie pothead and being married. And I was like, oh, okay. This doesn't matter. I never thought anything of it, just because it's just the performances are just amazing. But
knowing that makes me love him more, that he's a cool Aussie pothead. Like, he's
so
much fun.
I love him.
Guy, call us. Be on the show.
I would not do that. No, I like the separation. That's fine. Oh, and I said this to Zita before. I probably would have, if I ever spoke to him, I would probably ask him, as a vegetarian, why did you ever sign on to do Ravenous, a film about cannibalism? And two, whatever happened to the Abbotsford?
Yeah. Low key, Ravenous, good movie.
Oh,
I really like that movie a lot.
Frankly, and I think I talked about this one before with Zita, the first time I ever saw a movie where I thought, this movie is the most homoerotic thing I've ever seen. Like, the whole innuendo of it's men and they're consuming.
No, man, that movie is straight up gay porn. Like, that movie is,
it's like, like, yes,
it's a lot.
Yes.
It's a lot, for sure. Yes. Agreed.
It just keeps getting deeper. There's just so much to love here, as far as I'm concerned.
Can you imagine if our beloved Montgomery Clift had ever done like an actual like Brokeback Mountain kind of movie? I'm picturing it now. Hold on.
I'm not sure this podcast would survive that movie. You just explode. Like, it would just be too much.
If there were like, and if they found out that there were like deleted scenes of him and John Ireland in Red River. Excuse me, I'm Blanche Devereaux.
I love how you've let this thing that doesn't exist just take over your entire brain. Like,
I've decided.
It's this thing I made up. No,
it's because this isn't the first time I've actually had this thought in my head about him and John Ireland.
Up at night, man. Let me tell you,
that does not surprise me.
There was a podcast interview that Guy Pearce did where he was apparently sitting in his office, and the interviewer said to him, like, what is that behind you? And he's like, oh, they're all my folders from my movies. And he pulls out like this binder of Memento with like all his notes, and he takes like pictures and scripts and everything. And I'm just like, this is porn to me. I want to see every single one of these scripts that he's like written and scribbled all over and kept, and they're all so organized. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like, and I did tweet to, it was the Ammon, I I have it bookmarked on my Twitter page. I was like, thank you. This is going to live rent free in my head forever. And I did write about this at InSessionFilm.com. So, Amy, what were you writing recently?
Yeah, what were you writing recently?
I haven't actually published anything recently, but I have many ideas. So Dave, you will hear from me soon with a plethora
good.
of ideas.
I look forward to it.
Because it's summer vacay. I've got the time. So
okay. All right.
Random musings.
Dave, InSessionFilm.com and at InSessionFilm is where we follow everything. And there's Patreon, YouTube, their merchandise. We're all blanked out now, tricked out in our Women in Session gear. What else are you doing? Just at InSession Film?
So I edit everything that comes through there. So really everything that's on that site is mine. That's how I look at it. I also just wrote a review of Master Gardener, which I despised. I thought was one of the most disgusting movies I've seen in years. So you could read that if you really want to share my pain. I also have my own podcast called Off Screen Death. That is, of course, on any podcatcher of choice. Basically, it's me and my buddy Mike, and I make him watch really, really, really good movies, and he makes me watch movies that are not so well reviewed, but might be worth a watch. So we kind of trade off from episode to episode.
Does it have a Twitter handle or Instagram?
It's just at Off Screen Death. So very easy to remember, hopefully.
Amy, you're a
Thomas. I will say
Go ahead.
Sorry, A. Thomasson 11, but I was on the main show and I reviewed The Little Mermaid. Where anyone at home, you can actually see my face because it's on YouTube.
And
right.
You got in an argument with JD about The Lion King.
I did.
Yeah. Literally none of this is surprising. Like this is, this all tracks.
Yep.
I was disappointed he was not wearing a hockey jersey. I was like, come on, man, come on. It's the playoffs. It's the Stanley Cup. You're not representing in your
fake fan. That JD doesn't really like hockey. Truth comes out.
I don't have anything. Well, I have a lot to say. I could just keep going. The road just never ends, does it? Again, stupid things. I laugh so hard, like the whole vastness. I mean, we stop and think about it. I mean, the costumes are amazing, but the Australian visuals are just so beautiful. Totally. And wow, when they're stuck on the road, perhaps we should have flown. And then they're playing like I Spy with My Little Eye, something R, and he's like rectum, and I'm like, ring pirate, and then they're just like road.
Right.
I mean, this movie could be boiled down so simply as like it's a road trip, like a road trip musical, but it's also like so much more than that. A game coming out to his son. There's just so many touching. There's something for everybody. I highly recommend this movie, and InSessionFilm.com. You can read all the things we've written. You can see Dave's touch all over our material.
I don't know if I like that phrasing. Can we take another?
His little magic touch,
Yeah, worse, getting worse. I have molded your work into something that can be seen on InSessionFilm.com.
There'll be these questions of what you're trying to say, or fix this, change that, and then other times there's like a comma, and I'm like, oh, good.
Got it.
This has been a lot of fun. Sometimes we try and be serious and try and be formal and be sensitive, but then it's like, no, sometimes it's okay to just laugh and share our love of excellent cinema.
Indeed.
Amy, Dave, thank you very, very much for being here, representing. Awesome.
Thanks for having me.
Yay. This is exciting.
Yes.
I'm excited. And we've had listeners, and I don't know what it really means when it says like there's like 3,000 views or something on a tweet, or if it's only just retweeted a few times or liked or shared or quoted, but it's so nice when we get love and comments.
It is.
Maybe people are listening. Yay. But thank you to those of you out there who are listening, and we'll see you at the next Women in Session.
Hi, it's D Smooth here. Black History Month and Juneteenth are very important events to me because I believe in celebrating our culture and the many accomplishments of the Black community. Join me as we celebrate freedom through food and fellowship with Safeway, Saturday, June 17th. We're honoring Juneteenth at the Safeway store at 2845 Alabama Avenue Southeast with tastings from minority-owned businesses, live music, face painting for the kids, and more. Head over to @safeway.com/Black History for details.